how going to extremes can be awesome, designing and dominating a giant new sports category, and why Joe De Sena might just be the most tenacious athlete and entrepreneur you and I ever met. All right. Hey ho, let's go. Welcome, my legendary friends, to this episode of Legends and Losers. And man, am I ever glad you joined us. Today we have a mind-blowing guest. I could not believe how extraordinary Joe De Sena is, and how generous and open he is, and his story is one that I think you're going to find absolutely riveting. Now, if you're a new listener to Legends and Losers, welcome. And if you're a longtime listener, all I can say is there's no excuse for that behavior. Now, if you're new, I got to warn you, this is not an interview show. And it's a new category of podcast you could think of as an authentic dialogue show. That is to say, our goal is to be the antidote to business bullshit. And here's what I mean by that. If you listen to most interviews with most people, what you find is you have an interviewer who's got a narrative they're trying to drive, a conclusion they want to get you to, some story they want to wrap into a perfect little bow for you. And you have somebody being interviewed who is a professional, and therefore they have their talking points. And so you have an interviewer with a prefab narrative, and you have an interviewee with their talking points, and they just go at it. And typically, those things don't last for very long. Even podcasts, the average business podcast is probably about half an hour, if that. And so they just try to deliver, quote unquote, as much value in a short period of time as possible. For the most part, a lot of it is hackneyed bullshit, and they never get down to anything real. We're the antidote to that. So we aspire to have authentic conversations with legendary people about what it takes to design a legendary life and business. And so that's what the show's about. And it's very different. We almost do no editing of the show. We give you the real conversation as it happened, with very minor exceptions. And then we let you decide what the narrative is. We let you decide what the sound bites are. We let you decide what the big learnings are. Now, our friends at onelifefullylive.org, check us out online. We have our annual conference coming up very soon, October 21 and 22 in beautiful Sacramento. We are a nonprofit organization started by my friend Tim Rode, and I've been supporting the organization since even before it was founded. And it's an amazing group, because what One Life is all about is trying to give you all the resources, assets, tools, and relationships you need to dream, plan, and live your best life at as close to free as possible. So check us out online and come see us in Sacramento, October 21 and 22. As well, if you would like to participate in a Q&A session with me about business, about life, or anything else you want to talk about, play bigger, category design, the whole thing, then what we're going to be doing at One Life is the One Life folks are going to be auctioning off a Q&A session with me over the web using Zoom technology. And so if you want to make a donation to One Life and participate in one of those Q&A sessions, send email to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. We'll connect you with the right folks at One Life. You can make your donation, and then you can get into one of those Q&A sessions. Also want to tell you, our friends at NetSuite, we're still on tour. They're doing a bunch of dates that I'm not going to be at. And the last one, the final date that I will be at, is November 9th in Miami. And I'll be doing a talk on category design, signing copies of Play Bigger. There'll be other legendary entrepreneurs and innovators there. We may have a sports hero or two show up, and you can get your copy of Play Bigger signed. And if you don't have a copy, you can pick up a free copy there. Now, speaking of NetSuite, at this event not long ago in beautiful Manhattan, we had a great night. Man, was it ever hot and sweaty. Holy moly. Anyway, I'm standing there, and we're getting sort of ready to do the event. And this guy comes up to me named Ryan Rogers. And he's a NetSuite guy. And he says, listen, he says, I want you to know that what I'm about to say makes no sense. And I understand it makes no sense. But here's how it goes. He goes, I know you. You and I are bros. We hang out a couple times a week. We drink scotch. We have beers. We have awesome conversations with awesome people. And we have a great time. And we're bros. And he said, and I know that that's how it is for me, meaning him, and that you don't know me. And that's I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially how the conversation started with Ryan. And it was really fun to get to know you, Ryan. And you put your finger on something that has now been going on in my life for, I don't know, about 6 months or so, Since I started to go out in the world and Legends and Losers got popular, I now have this experience in my life that I never had before, which is people come up to me and they act like I'm their best friend because they listen to the show, and God bless them. And so they know me. But here's the thing they don't get. I don't fucking know them. Now, I try really hard to come up to speed quickly. And that was sort of the fun thing about what Ryan said, was he understood that dynamic. And he's the first guy I've met since Legends and Losers took off that kind of put that on the table. Anyway, Ryan, it was great to meet you. Great to meet some of your customers. And what can I say? I hope our night in New York was as good for you as it was for me. I also want to shout out to Kevin Miller. He's an extraordinary entrepreneur. He's the host of the outstanding top-rated business podcast, The Ziegler Show. And he recently posted something on Facebook that just knocked me over. A picture of himself with Play Bigger, and an incredible post. And on the post, he said things like, quote, "Most profound biz book since Start With Why. You'll stop your business efforts and wrap them around the focus of category design." So Kevin, thank you, brother. All right, Joe De Sena. He's the founder of the Spartan race company, and he's the primary category designer of the obstacle course racing category. And more people will participate in an obstacle course in America this year than will in a marathon. Wrap your head around that. So this guy not only created a category, but he actually created a whole new movement and a whole new way of thinking about competition, training, and he's just really on the forefront of the whole extreme athletic move. He's the author of a great book called Spartan Up, a Take No Prisoners Guide to Overcoming Obstacles and Achieving Peak Performance in Life. And he's the host of an ass-kicking podcast called Spartan Up, going with the tight branding. Very good. And he's just an amazing guy. This conversation, I think, will blow you away. He started off as a hustler, been an entrepreneur most of his life. He ended up having a great career on Wall Street, ended up as an equities and derivatives trader. And then he kind of thought he was powering down a little bit. And then, like a lot of entrepreneurs, got obsessed. He was always an extreme athlete, and one thing led to another. And you're going to hear the story of how it all came together. And today, he's the category king of a category that he designed. And now, here he is, Joe De Sena on Legends and Losers. So, Joe, you have said that a lack of knowledge is an advantage. Tell me about that.
I think it's a huge advantage. I think I was just talking about this last night. I think one of the things that holds us back in life is that we have too much knowledge in some instances, or we do too much digging, too much investigating, and really talk ourselves out of what could be great things, great effort, great challenges, because we look at all the downside. And you know, if the great people we look up to throughout history did that, they wouldn't have done much, right? Because they would have talked themselves out of doing things that aren't normal. And I am definitely a big fan of being abnormal.
Yeah, no shit. I could tell. I think the first time your name came into my, mind space, of course, I understood this trend that you're really, and it's something I want to talk a lot today about with you, is you're the primary category designer of this whole new category of racing. And so I knew that was going on and had heard the different racing companies and had a few friends that were in some of the early ones. But I remember reading, and maybe you'll know what year it was. I feel like it was at least 2 or 3 years ago, in Outside Magazine, a story about you and you bringing folks up to your place in Vermont. And I checked on it in preparation, but I remembered it from back then. The headline said, "Meet the most punishing man in fitness."
Yeah, I remember the article, and I remember them coming up to spend some time with me in Vermont, and having the writers and folks hike the mountain with me. And I always like to carry stuff up the mountain when I go up, or wake up early in the morning and run stairs. And I don't know, it seemed very normal to me to grab a rock and hike up the mountain, or wake up at 5 a.m. and get in the stairwell of a hotel. And these guys just thought I was nuts. So I guess that's how we ended up with that title.
Now, look, and I'm going to say this with love, like, and huge respect, because I love what you do. Doesn't everybody who meets you and knows you think you're fucking nuts?
I'm working on that.
I mean, come on, Joe. I mean, there's a million things to talk about, but did you actually run the fucking Iditarod?
I did. Yeah.
Did you, like, while the Iditarod was going on, you ran?
Well, here's the crazy
Like, what did you do?
Here's the crazy thing is, we were
Hey, could you turn
actually.
your do not disturb on your computer?
Tell me where that is.
Are you on a Mac?
I'm on a Mac.
Okay, if you go up to the far right, you'll
Yeah.
see these three lines with these three little dots in front of it. It's a little icon. And actually, that icon has a name, but I forget what it is now.
Yeah.
And then the first thing you should see is a today and a notifications. And then right under there, you should see blank space. And if you wave your cursor on that blank space, this little thing pops up that says do not disturb on or off.
I would be the only person that doesn't have that do not disturb thing because it's not coming up because I clearly am disturbed
So,
nonstop.
so yeah, I know how you feel. So if you just
today, I see notifications, and I'm glad the listeners are getting a little taste here on how to do this. But literally, nothing's coming up.
So are you waving? We can actually, if you don't mind, you can share your screen with me.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, let me.
How do I do that?
If you go to Zoom at the bottom of the Zoom window, and you kind of wave your cursor around there, a bunch of control buttons should come up. And
yeah, it says
share screen is next to chat and next to manage participants.
You got it?
Not yet.
Do
I have to do something? No, that's my screen. Okay, there we go. I think that's it. Yeah, there you are. Beautiful. So let's expand this. Beautiful. Oh no, we don't want to do that. Let's go back to, we want to be back over here. Sorry. Because I'm sort of seeing your computer and my computer. It's a little trippy. And I'm the farthest from the world's most technical guy. Yeah, so this thing right here that I'm on right there, press that.
I can't see you, but
you want me to right there. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then just jiggle your.
I gotta move that. Okay.
Now jiggle around in there. Yeah, maybe like a little more over here. Maybe pull down a little.
See, I told you, I am.
How fucking weird is that?
I'm the only guy that can't stop people from disturbing me.
I wonder if you have. Is yours old or new, or is there anything? My computer's about 6 months old. Yeah, if I could find out what version of the opera.
Isn't that crazy?
Maybe click on the notifications tab and as opposed to the today's tab.
I just got it. Hang on.
Oh, there we go.
Shows your alerts, the upper right screen without interrupting what you're clicking. This icon in this menu bar. Do not disturb. I got it. Man, you are a genius. Now what do I do?
I think you click that from to. Right over here, you got a from to right here.
I can't see it. So what do I got to do?
You don't see this right here? Do you see my cursor?
No.
You don't see shit.
I don't see anything. So
why don't you see my cursor? Can I take over your computer? I thought I could. Viewing options. Yeah, request remote control. There we go. This is a very terrifying thing you're about to do here, handsome.
It's okay.
I think if we do, what time is it there?
It is 7:08 p.m. That's cool.
I don't know if this is going to work. I'm just guessing. Oops, PM, for the love of.
Cool.
Okay, see if that works. Here, let me give you your computer back. Give up remote control.
Well, do I have to? I just leave it like that. I don't have to do anything. Just close it.
Yeah, it should just fire now. Like it should be okay now. We shouldn't hear it now.
All right.
Uh,
Yeah, give me my computer back
oh
because
yeah, how do I give you it all the way back? Soon as this starts to get weird pretty fast.
meet
Yeah, I
you.
think you're crazy.
I think you're crazy. And yeah, I guess everybody does, but I think I'm normal and everybody else is crazy. I don't do anything that's like I wake up really early and I have the kids work out. And so, we'll go out at like 5:45 a.m. We'll be carrying rocks around. We'll do a bunch of burpees. We'll do sprints. And there's nobody really out at 6 in the morning, especially not, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds. And sometimes they're in the pajamas and you'll see like a police officer or something go by and like take a double take. And I think to myself, like, yeah, I could see somebody saying we're nuts, but really everybody else that is kind of hung over from all the candy and the desserts and junk food, and they're the ones that are nuts. Like, we're up early being productive, we're supposed to be up when the sun's up. Me and the kids are up. That's just one example of things that I think are normal and others don't, I guess.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you about those kinds of things. And I can remember years ago listening to some Deepak Chopra tapes, the 7 ways to have an awesome life or whatever the fuck it was about, right? And I remember at the time I was living in my home country of Canada, Joe, and I remember listening to him on my morning run, and he said you should spend at least 2 hours a day in nature. And I literally laughed out loud. Like, who the fuck are you crazy? Because I spent my whole life inside a house or inside a car or inside a building, right? And now if I average 2 hours a day in nature, I would kill myself because I'm in nature way more than that. And so there's an interesting thing that happens for people, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. We have a farm in Vermont. That's where the guys that wrote the article in the magazine you read
And you still live there
came
now?
to us, and it's. I don't. I did the last year in Tokyo, the year before that in Singapore, and this coming year you're going to appreciate. We're going to Vancouver,
Oh,
so
wow,
which I've
that's
never been to
great.
Vancouver.
Oh, have you
So
been to San Francisco?
I've been to San Fran. Yep.
So the best description I've ever heard of Vancouver goes like this. Vancouver is like a smaller San Francisco, only Yosemite is where Oakland is.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And with all the shit you love to do, you're going to lose your mind in the Rockies in and around Vancouver and throughout British Columbia. I mean, it is as beautiful a place as you can be. There are other beautiful places, of course, but in my opinion, there's no more beautiful.
Well, the farm in Vermont, which we still have, is still my favorite. And I picked that place after racing all over the world, places like the Iditarod that you brought up earlier. And everywhere I raced, I thought, could I live here? Could I live here? Could I live here? And when I found this place, dead center of Vermont, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of untouched acres of national forest, I thought, this is great because, there's no like killer snakes. I'm not going to get eaten by a shark. Like, you could just go out there for a while, and there's not even many ticks. You don't even,
Aren't you worried about rogue Canadians?
I'm not worried about road Canadians, although I did run into them on the mountain bike trails. But it's awesome in Vermont. That said, I haven't been to Vancouver yet. My wife is just coming back from renting the house and getting us set up. So we leave on Sunday, and I guess where I was going with that was I would do my conference calls out in the field on the farm. I would just pace back and forth, and then I'd climb up. And it was like, I don't think anybody, based on what you just said, could understand. It was, so yeah, Tokyo's been cool. Singapore's been great. Vancouver's going to be great. But man, the farm with only 400 people in town, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of acres, where a moose just shows up in your backyard, and I chop wood. I don't know why everybody doesn't live there.
Yeah. That war journalist Younger, I think is his last. Is it Sebastian? Is it Sebastian Younger? Is that his name? Do you know?
I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah, he just wrote a book about this, and his advice is sort of, we've got it all fucked up in our world that
well, when we're successful and make money, we move up the mountain or we move into the gated community. And like the number one thing we want is to make sure that we're away from everybody else and we don't want to know anybody and we're protected. Right. And so the more money we make, the more withdrawn we are from our community and our surroundings. And his advice based on his learnings and his travel is the happiest people in the world who are people who live in these small, deeply connected communities or tribes where we all know each other and we can do stuff with each other and for each other, etc.
I remember when I did a race in Fiji, and we were in the interior of Fiji where nobody goes. As a matter of fact, we covered 300 or 400 miles where we had Fijians that were barefoot, no shoes, and were using machetes to chop away at stuff for us to get through. So it was remote. They had never seen cars. They had never seen TVs where we were. And I remember I was sick. I had dysentery and giardia. I lost like 30 pounds, and I was sitting in this little village. So we had, let's call it 14 hours where I was trying to recover. And I was like, man, these people seem so happy. They don't have anything. They've got, 60 of them in this little village. It's going to take them, it's a 14-mile hike for them barefoot to get to the village next door. And they're just so happy. And so I agree.
And they don't even have a Costco.
And they don't have a Costco. They don't have anything. I was happy. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I found myself, I've been finding myself in more conversations like this about sort of, did we get it backwards? And in particular around our connection to nature. I had a fascinating conversation a while ago, late at night in Vancouver, actually in Whistler at a conference where I was speaking. And, late at night, the boys were drinking, et cetera, et cetera. And there's one guy was making these fascinating comments about that we as a modern culture, modern society are living in zoos of our own creation.
I would agree with that. As you described the gated fence, and, I grew up in Howard Beach, Queens, and everybody had a 40-foot by 100-foot building lot. And I did a lot of construction work as a young kid. I worked on swimming pools, and I put up fences, cement work. And
you were the swimming pool king to the mafia. Is that what was going on?
I was. But we measured and all the detail of all that work with like micrometers. It had to be perfect. And it was all meant to, one, showcase, I guess, somebody's wealth, but also keep everybody out. Figuratively, if you really wanted to get in a backyard, you could. But you're absolutely right? Like what's it all for? I think that journalist is onto something.
Well, it's interesting. I have only recently, in the last 10 years or so of my life, and more profoundly in the last 5, had an experience of community. And so my whole life, I didn't really know my neighbors, or certainly not many of them. And while I lived in places that I liked, I lived in some places I didn't like, but for the most part, lived in places I generally liked. I didn't feel a connection to the community. And where I live today in Santa Cruz, California, it's profound for me, Joe. Everybody here says hello and good morning and how are you? And we know all of our neighbors. And we have a garden which is shared amongst 5 families. And in our case, it's at the front of the lot. So everybody in the community can see it. And people stop by and we give them eggs from our hens or berries or tomatoes are going mental right now. So like we're giving everybody tomatoes and our fig tree's about to fire and we'll be giving the whole, et cetera, et cetera. And when people are in trouble, they stop by, or, whatever it is, we have an email distribution list for the neighborhood. Everybody communicates if something weird's up or somebody's throwing a party or whatever it is. Right. And so it's a profound sense of connection. And it may sound silly to some people who've had that their whole lives, but, having only had that recently in my life, I go, wow, where you live fucking matters.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I am a little bit of a, believe it or not, even though I've got 1 million people a year coming through this race business and I have a lot of friends, I would just love to be on the farm with very few people around. That doesn't mean what you just described wouldn't be awesome. It sounds actually awesome, but I don't know. Maybe I had too many years of too many people. Working on Wall Street. I don't know what it is. But if I had to lay out my perfect day, it'd probably be like chopping wood and snowshoeing, and maybe I'd say hello to a rogue Canadian, as you said, going by. But I don't know.
We could
like
have an
dogs.
argument about whose maple syrup is better, Vermont's or Quebec's. The first time at the time,
There you go. You gotta go with one.
well, see, this is where we could have a dialogue. The first time my girlfriend at the time, wife now, came home with Vermont maple syrup, I had to explain things to her.
That's funny. You guys, like, Vermont started that whole thing, didn't they? Or would you say Canada did?
The truth is, I don't know. What I do know is, I bet you almost everybody in Quebec would say Quebec did. But I don't know. Have you been to a sugar shack?
Yeah.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah. In Vermont. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that kind of winter activity, obviously is something that is it's sort of like the Pacific Northwest where you're going. Vancouver is very connected to Seattle and that whole, area. It's sort of its own thing, if you will, independent of the two countries. And I kind of felt that way with Vermont. When I was a kid, my mom would dump me off on a Saturday early in the morning at a bus stop, and me and a buddy, at like 10 or 12 years old, would get on a bus and go ski Jay Peak, Vermont. And at the end of the day, we'd get back on that bus and go home. We would do that on weekends in the winter.
I think that contributes to somebody's success later in life. I went at a young age to Killington, so you and I are actually more like each other than we know. And I got a tattoo the other day, so we're really like brothers. But today's day and age, you wouldn't put your kid on a bus and send them to just a ski resort at 12 years old. Yeah. So I think I'm going to have to do that when my 11-year-old is 12. I think you just made it a point of another thing that people are going to say is the reason I'm crazy. Put the kids on a bus.
Well, first of all, I don't know why we don't let kids do that stuff, period. Because, well, you want to hear my crazy theory about this?
Yeah.
I think we began on this path, and this is something I actually really do want to talk to you about, Joe. This path to what George Carlin called the pussification of America. At best I could tell, started with those plastic protectors that go in the light sockets.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because when you and I were kids, what happened? We jammed our finger in those light sockets. Yeah. And sooner or later, you stop doing that, right? And so to me, that was the beginning of helicopter parenting. And look, I'm not completely insane. Some of the protections and so forth that are in place are awesome. I don't, seat belts, and there's a lot. But somewhere the thing tipped, right?
Like everything, right? Unions were probably good in the early 1900s, but then it goes too far the other way. But I agree that I suspect. And women are going to hate me. Moms especially going to hate me when I say this, so I'll say it's moms and dads. But when you look at most families, right, the dads typically takes a harder approach than the mom, and the mom, and I get it, wants to protect the kid and coddle him and this and that, and then that kid, that female or male, is a little softer. So the next generation, they coddle a little more. They come up with the plastic little electric protectors as you just described, and it just gets worse and worse and worse every year. And I was thinking last night, I was watching. You're gonna like this actually. It was my 10-year-old's birthday, so we went to go see Dunkirk. Because I have all the kids here, so I have
excellent parenting.
I got 6 kids here under 11. We went to see Dunkirk with me, and they were like, "I said you can't tell anybody we're seeing this."
Therapy bills. It's like I had a crazy uncle, and he made me watch all kinds of movies like that, and some of them still haunt me to this day. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm a big believer in jumping right in with the kids, but so I'm watching it, and my typical analogy based on the topic you're talking about here is I would say, look, we're all animals. There's no other animal in the animal kingdom that would do what I just described or you just described, which is the animals are all getting the cubs ready for the wild. And we're doing the opposite, right? We're protecting them and not getting them ready for the wild. But it really hit home last night, sitting with 6 kids in this movie, Dunkirk, under 11, watching it, where this young kid basically is on this beach in Dunkirk, and he's not prepared, as would, any 17-year-old, 18-year-old wouldn't be prepared for this situation. And I thought to myself, really, I need to tell people, would you expect to send a young man or woman out to battle without preparing them, whether it's boot camp, right? So why then would you expect it's okay to send a kid out to the world, which is in some ways a much tougher battle, without preparing them? And so that preparation, is everything you and I are talking about. It's up at 5:45 in the morning. It's, I sent my kids to survival camp last week, and my son came back with a giant cut on his hand. I mean, like, giant cut. And I said, how did it happen? And the guy I had take them out in the woods in Vermont, he gave them knives, big knives, sharp knives. And they were told to cut some things, and that he cut it the wrong way, and he nearly cut his hand off. And so everybody's, oh, you're crazy. Why would you do that? Well, kid's got to learn, right? He's got to learn. Like, at some point, he's going to have a knife.
I remember. How old is he again?
He just turned 10 yesterday.
Yeah. About that age, maybe 11, Cub camp. And my dad, God bless him, my dad, Bruce, he was always awesome about all that stuff, and he actually gave me my love for the outdoors, and I will always be grateful for that gift and many others. But anyway, long story longer, we're at Cub camp. He's a counselor, assistant, dad, whatever the fuck. And I'm in my senior year at Cub camp. And so I'm going to go off for a couple of days with the older guys and, get a little more remote and so forth and so on. So I'm chopping wood. I got a hatchet, and I cut the tip of my left fuck you finger, to about the middle point, and it really hurts, and it's gushing blood, right? And we're like off in the woods, right? And so, the kids who are the counselors, they deal with it and all that stuff. And, sooner or later they get a boat together and take me back to the camp and all this. And my dad was just completely Fonzie. Like, hey, Dad, look, I cut mine. And it was like, oh, yeah, well, that happens if, you're chopping wood and you're not paying attention.
That was exactly this guy who's a real badass, who was taking the kids out for me for 2-3 days. He's been sending me texts, hey, is Charlie's hand okay? Hey, is Charlie's hand okay? And I don't think he expected me to be like, I don't really care. He's fine.
Yeah, I mean, kid's not dead.
Yeah. It's fine.
Pay attention when you're playing with knives.
That's right. I'm with you.
Well, I love that, and my dad was very much that way. Like, I can remember being probably 16, maybe even a little younger than that. And he was in the ski patrol, so we'd been skiing, and he had some ski patrol meeting, and he dumped me off at the restaurant with the rest of his buddies who weren't at the ski patrol meeting. And, I grew up in Quebec, so a kid could drink beer in the restaurant. And so we're having burgers and beer after a day of skiing. Anyway.
How old can you drink beer?
Well, the law is 18, but it's merely a suggestion.
Got it. Didn't know that.
So, I end up having, 3 or 4 beers, more than I should have. And long story longer, that night I puke in the middle of the night, get up at 3 a.m. and puke. And we're staying at a ski house that's, got us and some other folks in it. And so anyway, I come back from the bathroom and I poke my dad, because we're sharing a bed in the middle of the night. I go, Dad, I puked all over the bathroom. And my mom probably would have got up and cleaned it and put a towel, cold cloth on my head or something, right? My dad says, well, get in there and fucking clean it up.
I love that. Love that. So your dad should have been on the cover of that magazine. But I'm with you. And so I don't think that's abnormal, to the original point, right? I think I'm actually normal. Everybody else is abnormal.
So this may sound like a funny question, but you do a lot of running, right? You do a lot of racing.
So I don't run a lot on a day-to-day basis, because I just don't want to, knock on wood, I don't have any injuries. And I just always thought that if you run too much, it's going to cause injuries. So kind of like a boxer does when I have an event coming up. So I ran a 50 miler maybe a month ago. And a buddy of mine told me we were doing it in Canada, funny enough, up at Blue Mountain.
Toronto, just outside of Toronto. Yeah.
It was awesome. And I had 3 weeks to train for it, and I hadn't run in a while. And so I went out and I said, all right, I'm going to run 10 miles a day for the next 3 weeks. And boom, I was ready to go. Again, knock on wood, no injuries. So I do a lot of yoga. I do work out every day. I do burpees, I do pull-ups, I got all these movement exercises I do to keep mobile. I would say it's more of a combination of like body weight exercises and yoga that I do every single day religiously.
And do you have any idea, Joe, how many races you personally have been in your life of one sort or another?
I've been in a lot of races. I have no idea. I definitely have an addictive personality, and putting a race on the calendar for me and for most people gets me motivated, as I just described, to go take it up a notch. I'm not looking to necessarily win because I've never been fast, but I'm relentless. I'm relentless.
You're a bear, right? You're just going to keep coming, right?
Keep going. Yeah. Nice and stuff.
And my understanding is your dad, you'd consider an entrepreneur. Is that right?
My dad was a maniac. My dad came out of Brooklyn, where everybody in his family and all his friends were on the other side of on the dark side. And he was creative, and he owned a bunch of businesses, pizza places, taxi cabs, trucking.
It sounds like he was a hustler.
He was a hustler. It's a great word, and a very common word in the neighborhood I grew up in, and he was in. And he really hits it big, I'm guessing, around 19, 20 years old. After starting a bunch of different businesses, he buys a truck, gets in trucking at JFK, at John F. Kennedy Airport, and lands a big account. And that account ends up developing into IBM. And so by the time I was 12, 13, he's got, he's doing well, very well. And he goes out because he's a creative guy, and he buys a ton of buildings and hotels, and not giant stuff like in Manhattan, not Trump type stuff. But probably had in the mid 80s, probably had $20 million worth of properties, 5 family homes and such. And
in the mid 80s, it's still real money today. It was way real money then.
Yeah. But today, now in 2017, when I think back to the properties he chose, then again, property's gone, doesn't matter what property, they've all gone up and up and up and up. So not to say he was smart, but he picked some really interesting locations, and then he loses the account. IBM decides to consolidate their freight in Japan. And he was using that money to pay for all these real estate bills and taxes and renovations. And so slowly, like watching 2 trains collide in slow motion, he starts to lose everything. So now just became a teenager, and I'm watching this, and really it was great for me. It was terrible for him, because it taught me the value of money. It got me off my ass, and it really just jump-started this whole, I remember I went with my mom. She was buying a Chevy, they were divorced, and we were in Ithaca, New York, and she was barely figuring out how she could buy this Chevy. I forget whatever it was an ugly car. And next door was BMW. And I looked at the BMW because at a young age, like I said, my father was doing well, so I was around nice stuff. And I said, man, I want one of those. And my mother turned to me and said, well, you got to work. If you work, you get one of those. And that moment, that you never know with a kid, right? The one sentence that's going to really sink in. And that was like a vice grip on my head that would transform my life. That one sentence at that one moment. And that was it. I defined myself as a worker from then on.
Is that when you started the pool cleaning business?
That was when I started the pool cleaning business. We'd go back to my dad in Queens in the summers. And my dad, his pool was turning green at this point because he didn't have the money things were a lot different, and it was deteriorating quickly. And my neighbor was the head of the Banana organized crime family. I was too young at the time to really understand it, although I knew he was a big shot and people respected him. And there was cars stopping in front of his house all day, every day, bringing him things. And he took me under his wing. He really took a liking to me. He saw what was going on with my dad. And he said, come on, kid, come clean my pool. So I was getting $35 a week from him. But he taught me some really key lessons, right? Like how important it is to show up on time, right? Make a commitment. You better be there. Go above and beyond. Not only are you going to clean the pool, I'm paying you to clean the pool, but you should probably straighten up the lawn furniture, straighten up my shed. If the dog on the side of the house pooped, make sure you clean that up. And those, any normal business person that had a business would have said, what are you talking about? That has nothing to do with the job you're hiring me to do. But he was right, because I made myself indispensable, invaluable. And when people came home, it was like, oh, Joe is here. So
be that guy, right? Be that guy that everybody goes, yeah, that's the guy. There's no question that's the guy you want.
And never ask for money. You weren't going to ask these guys for money. They paid you when they wanted to pay you. And
wow.
And
when did you figure out they were the Sopranos?
Well, I guess, it's hard to reflect back now and say at 13, I didn't know. But like on 4th of July, for example, probably starting when I was 8 or 9, so 4 years earlier, literally a tractor trailer would show up of the leftover fireworks that they didn't sell. And I kid you not, and I have witnesses on this that we could get, I kid you not, we would pour gasoline. I'm 8 or 9 years old at this point in the street. And it was way too many cases and cases of fireworks. And we would just throw them into the fire. And it was like, I don't know what World War II was like, but holy shit. Houses would catch on fire.
Just like in the middle of the street, Joe?
Right in the middle of the street. And
holy shit.
I had a friend show up from, hang on, let me take a sip of water here. I had a friend show up from Hong Kong later in life that I went to Cornell with, who really understood fireworks, because that's where all the fireworks were being made. And he said, I got to get him on the show. He said, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. This is unbelievable. Fireworks shooting in every direction. It was just complete insanity. So anyway, you see that at 9 or 10 years old, right? And people are probably making comments. You kind of know the guy's the real deal. I'm sure my father made some comments to me, and he was the only guy on the block with the house that had big white pillars, and it was clear this was different.
And it wasn't just because he had a really great car business or something, whatever front business he had.
He had a lot of businesses, but
yeah.
But I grew up and I became close with him, and I would be over the house a lot. And as my business grew, I had a customer that he had recommended that was 30 minutes away in Queens. And I had done a big job, and the guy owed me $65,000, and I couldn't ask for it. And I was waiting. And I was over my neighbor's house one night, as I normally was. And he said, how's everything going? And I explained the situation with this guy. And he said, well, take this bottle of champagne and tell him that it's coming from me. And I showed up at his house, this guy that owed me the money, and I handed the bottle of champagne. I said, Joe sent this over. And he said, hold on, let me get you your money. And I didn't even say it. I didn't ask for the money. I didn't say anything. And he went into a safe and he gave me $65,000 in cash in a brown paper bag. So
how old were you, Joe?
Oh, at this time, probably 18 or 19.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, the business became
And can you remember the 18-year-old Joe? Like, what, as you're sort of going home that night, what was in your head, or what you thought you learned? Or
yeah, no, by 18, 19, I started to really understand it and respect it and probably idolize it, because who wouldn't want to be one of those guys? You got to remember, this is pre-1992, whenever it was that Giuliani started really cracking down, and all the people I knew including customers and friends that started going to jail or disappearing. And before that, it was like, you want to be one of those guys. You want to be affiliated with one of those guys because nobody's touching you, right?
Yeah.
Like,
you're literally a made man.
Yeah, or like they're taking care of you, and so and you got to understand, I had 700 customers with this thing. So I'm making up a number, but of the 700, let's say 200 of them were these guys. I knew everybody. I could get in his house. I could hang out on the couch. I was the guy that they trusted. I worked really hard, and that was respected. A guy that, because I hustled too, right? And so yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. But
I got to tell you, I love what you're saying because, I used to live in Silicon Valley. Now I live close to Silicon Valley, but, we hear a lot about, hey, teach kids to code software and, be what you might think of as biggie entrepreneurs. And that's great. And I think we should do that. And some of us don't have that option. You could have tried to teach me to code software for my entire life, and it was not going to happen. And what I love about what you're saying is, hey, teach kids to start a pool cleaning business, a lawn mowing business. I don't know if I don't think kids deliver newspapers anymore, but so many entrepreneurs that I know, including myself, my first job was delivering newspapers. You can be like, I recently had Cameron Harold on Legends and Losers. He was the COO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. These guys took a junk hauling business and turned it into a new category and a global dominant brand, a company that's worth a shit ton of money, hauling junk.
I love it.
So we don't have to all be Zuckerberg, right?
No, I when we were in Singapore 2 years ago, I said, to my wife, why don't we have the kids each develop a brand? We'll get online. You can go to that Fiverr website.
Fiverr, yeah, it's very cool.
And the kids could get like some artists to create their brand logos, and we'll get T-shirts and hats made, and we'll make them sell the T-shirts and hats on the beach or whatever. So we did it, and each kid, I basically laid out the money, which you shouldn't do, and I bought 100 T-shirts and hats for each kid and their brand. And then for the first summer, which was last summer, I said, you got to get on the beach, you got to sell it, and everybody said I was nuts. It's uncomfortable. Why, we can't have kids like hounding parents to try to. And I said, no, it's exactly what they should be doing. I want them to get rejected 5,000 times and figure out what they said differently that got the guy to buy the shirt. Because you're going to be selling your whole life. You're going to be selling to get your wife. You're going to be selling to, you're always selling.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Now, how did this whole obstacle race business and that whole category, how did you become, not just build the company, but I'm very curious how you connected the dot that either this was going to be or you could make it a giant new category in sport.
So we got to go back in time. While my dad was doing all those things we just talked about, my mom stumbles into a health food store one day in probably the early to mid 70s. It's near JFK, John F. Kennedy Airport.
Yeah.
At that moment in time, there happens to be this yogi that came in from India, and he stopped in the same health food store, Swami Bua. And he's like he would be like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of yogis. So my mom meets this guy, and after an hour of talking, she gets into yoga and meditation and health food, and becomes she's sold hook, line, and sinker. Comes home. My dad is like, "You're a crackpot. Everybody in the neighborhood's a crackpot." My sister and I don't want anything to do with her. But over time, she turns out to be right. Right now, 30 years later, there's Whole Foods, there's yoga magazine, right? Deepak Chopra, as you pointed out earlier, is normal.
I mean, where I live, Joe, in Santa Cruz, I often wonder, is there a law that there must be a yoga studio every quarter block? I mean, I don't know that I probably know more people who don't do yoga here than who do. You know, it's
so. Sorry, my son snuck out of bed here, and I want to tie him up.
do you need to pause and do something with him?
I might. I'm watching. I might get in trouble here if you guys film what happens, but so
I can hit pause.
I'm watching closely. So she's given us, my sister and I, this background, this mind-opening experience from a neighborhood that's really focused on cement, jail, and cannolis, and so I was more susceptible to being open-minded to these types of things. So fast forward, I get into doing endurance races, all kinds of crazy stuff, ultra runs.
At what age, Joe?
Probably late 20s, early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. And I just fall in love with it. It's a vacation for me. It's my meditation. It's everything. It's like, this is unbelievable. I feel like I'm mixing cement again in the neighborhood, right? And doing hard work and sweating. And so, any race, anywhere in the world, I got to do it. And as I'm doing it, I'm being transformed. I'm falling in love with the places it's just unbelievable. And then anybody I convince to do it with me, just like my mother used to convince people to do yoga, meditate, they're being transformed. So as I'm doing these races over a decade, I'm saying, and I'm an entrepreneur by heart. And so I'm like, I got to do this. I got to put on an event.
Are you on, you're on Wall Street at that point in your career?
I'm on Wall Street. I had sold the construction and swimming pool business, went to Wall Street, and my life generally sucks in the sense that I'm sitting in front of a computer stressed out all day. I mean, don't get me wrong. We're going out for 2-3 dinners a night. If you just wanted a taste of it, it was awesome for a little while, but it got old real fast. And so it really feels good when I go away and I'm doing these adventures. And so this is really my first foray into sport. And so for me, legitimate sport is 300, 400, 500 miles, 10, 12 days of suffering, because that's the way I entered this thing. Right.
And that's it. The end of part 1. Now, please turn the tape over, press play, and strap yourself in for part 2.